Warm welcome to everybody to our special Diwali special brought to you by the UK Asian Film Festival, produced by Tongues on Fire. I must say that although this year UK Asian Film Festival didn't take place in the way it should have, the festival has been doing everything that they can to sort of support the film industry and present you with filmmakers and talent, and make it accessible to everyone. Today we have a very, very special guest with one of India's leading contemporary filmmakers. Her film Dolly Kitty or Chamakte Sitare was meant to open the 22nd edition of UK Asian Film Festival. It's just been released on Netflix. It's amazing. She became a sensational icon for all women with her film Lipstick Under My Burkha. And she is none other than Alankrita Shrivastava, whose other works include Turning 30 and Made in Heaven. Hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here, Nisha. Thank you for the lovely and warm introduction.
Thanks. I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's an honor having you here, especially during the Diwali holiday. So thank you so much for taking the time out for us. I'm just going to jump straight in. I'm going to ask you about your childhood. Okay, so what were your influences growing up? For example, what kind of films did you watch when you were younger?
I had a very interesting childhood. I went to an all-girls boarding school. I must say that I was way more influenced by books than by films. And it continues to be that way. And it's really odd, but I'm not, honestly, I love making films, but I'm not such a big film watcher. Like, I really prefer, reading. And so I feel actually the largest influence in my life has definitely been the books that I read, and I was like a constant reader. And I, of course, by the time I was finishing school, I was really constantly reading a lot of female authors, which kind of really built up over the years and all of that. Now I find myself, I'm mostly always reading female writers, and I think they've had a strong influence in me. And of course, um, I think also, like, I've had a fairly, like, a fair amount of exposure to small towns because my father was with the government. So, um, we lived in various small, like really small towns. I think I had, like, because people keep wondering that, oh, how do you have this kind of insight into, the lives of more small town women? So I think it's that. And then I went to college. I went to Lady Shriram College, and I think I think, like, a lot of feminist influences kind of shaped me by the time I was in school, and then I was in college, and the stuff that I read. And also, I think, like, the institutions I went to also had, like, this big influence in me, because I think they really taught us to sort of think more critically about this, the world and the situation we are in. So we were always taught that even if the law, is one way, like, examine whether it's equal or not. And like how, so I think, like, there was just a lot of thoughts that I kind of had in my childhood. And now I feel maybe, everything that I'm now and the stories I'm interested in and my point of view is very much determined by all of that.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, we can see that in all your works, and I think going to like an all girls boarding school, I'm sure the reinforcement of like sisterhood and all those kind of notions are really drilled in you from a young age. So I mean, I can see that in your films. That's awesome. Moving slightly away from that, I just wanted to ask you, so you're called a writer, a director, a filmmaker, a storyteller. There's just so many titles. I wanted to ask you how you identify yourself.
Oh my God, that's such an interesting question. I guess I would say filmmaker
Right.
because, and maybe storyteller. Uh, yeah, as in, I would think of myself as a storyteller. I don't think I've thought of my self per se as a writer because I feel like for me writing and filmmaking are really connected. Like, everything I've made I've written myself, so I feel like for me it's almost like writing and directing becomes it almost becomes one thing for me.
Right.
So therefore filmmaker I feel in that sense is a better uh, way of thinking of myself. Also I don't do really do commissioned writing work per se. Made in Heaven was really the only thing that I've written, which like there were other directors and
Yeah.
other people were directing stuff that I had written, but that's really been the only exception. So I think a filmmaker is good and maybe storyteller because I think for me, the medium is not so critical. I think it's what I'm saying and how I'm looking at things that's more important. So, yeah, filmmaker and storyteller.
Filmmaker. Okay, cool. So when you obviously doing Made in Heaven, it was a collaborative process. And you wrote sort of all of the episodes, nine, was it 9 episodes or
Yeah, there were three to us. We wrote the entire show together, the entire
fine.
season. Yeah.
Were there creative differences? And if there were, how did you come about sort of resolving them and having this one vision of this is what we're going to show?
It was very interesting for me actually to be part of Made in Heaven because Zoya and Rima, the creators of the show, I really look up to them. They're really wonderful writers and directors. And but I mean, I didn't know them, and I had never really worked with them. And they've always been writing together for years. So I did feel that I was like, I wasn't very sure how it's going to sort of, turn out us being together in the writer's room. But it was really, really, I think, the most fulfilling working experience of my life because, and I think like Zoya and Rima really set the tone. Um, though I had never written with them before, but I think we had a very democratic kind of space.
Right.
So it was always about like if I feel one thing, Rima feels something else, Zoya feels something else. It's literally like you keep arguing and debating and until everyone agrees on that one point. So if there's a difference, if I feel no character should do this and someone else feels it's that, it's like who can really justify it, and then all three of us had to be convinced. And I think that was like a great way, and it was I think I really learned about collaboration, from them, how it is to work in a manner which is um, so like creating a space that's very safe and everyone's best comes out because you feel
Yeah.
like so secure. And it was very democratic. It wasn't like because I was um, uh, junior to them and also younger or anything, they ever made me feel like what I was saying was not important. So I think it really worked out well. It was really about like whoever can convince the others, and
Yeah.
it makes more sense. So I think
Right.
the show also then sort of is enriched by that, and it's not determined by just randomly like who's going to take the final call kind of a thing. So I think even while directing the show, there were 4 directors in the show. So I
Yeah.
think it was lovely in terms of how our collaboration worked out. So yeah.
Amazing. That sounds awesome. And we loved that show. All of my friends here and all the creatives that watched it, we absolutely loved it. Um, and the show talks about, these issues in India that the attitudes and values towards that is now like in a process of change. Um, and I guess because the UK, we follow everything that India does, especially the UK, like the South Asian society here, we follow India. But I wanted to ask about the Section 377. How did it feel for you when in real life, the act was decriminalized? Like, did you feel satisfied? Did you feel like a sense of fulfillment, happy?
Yeah, so the thing is that earlier, a few years back, the Delhi High Court had decriminalized homosexuality, and we had been very excited, but then the Supreme Court struck it down. So, there was this constant
Yeah.
to and fro kind of going on for the last like few years. And of course, when we were making Made in Heaven, it was not decriminalized at that point. So of course it's been like everyone's very very happy that Section 377 has been scrapped, but the point is that it's not enough like to just change. I mean, I think it's a big step forward that the law has changed, but I think like
Yeah.
it's like when mindsets actually change and society has to like open up a little bit more. So I think we still have a long way to go vis-a-vis the stigma and the stereotyping and not accepting. Of course it's way better now,
Yeah.
because at least by law it's not homosexuality is not a crime. But I think like when social acceptance actually happens, I think that is a much harder and a much slower process, and I think that hasn't really happened yet.
It's so when I watch your films, it's almost like in that world it does happen. You show us the problem, you show us what people think and what the society thinks, and by the end of it there's some sort of triumphant feeling, where whether it's a girl just smoking a cigarette and having a wine outside, and that's very kind of liberating to see, especially from being so far away from India. And it makes me happy that, okay, it feels like it's changing, or at least the cinema that's showing that is also changing as well. I wanted to ask you what your creative process is like. Does the idea come first, or the title come first? Yeah.
um I think it depends from film to film, but with Lipstick, as well as Turning 30, like the idea and the title just came simultaneously. I thought of the title and I thought of what the film is. Uh, uh, so it was very, very instant. Like, but the thing is, it keeps like I think of it and then it keeps growing in my mind for some time, for a long time before I actually start, writing it down.
Hmm.
Um, but with Dolly Kitty, I think it was like I had another title. It was a film that was like it was slow. I first thought of Kitty's story, then of Dolly's story. So it was more. But the moment the thing came together, the title came to me. So I always feel, and there's another film that I'm writing where I really don't have the title, and I've been struggling with the title for years, and I know that the moment that title comes, I feel that film will happen. And because it's one of those films that I've been writing and trying to mount, and it never kind of works out. But I feel like
Right.
there is something I haven't cracked the title. So I'm like, when I crack the title, then somehow the film will, I'll be able to do a new draft and I'll be able
Right.
to make that film. So I do feel that for me, titles are important. And I think they somehow capture the heartbeat of the film. So yeah,
Absolutely.
so therefore I feel like the idea and title, but it does happen. There's one film, like I was saying, which I've been writing for a really long time, and it doesn't have a title, so.
Okay. I see. I mean, I've been in some of these. During the pandemic, we were in some focus groups, and we were reading every week different scripts from different writers. And some of those scripts they had a working title. And by the end of focus group, we came up with a different title. Was Lipstick always Lipstick Under My Burqa from the beginning till the end?
Lipstick was Lipstick on My Burqa right at the beginning,
Yeah.
but when we were shooting, I had changed the name to Lipstick Wale Sapne based on that
Ah,
book.
okay.
But then when I was editing it, I changed the title back because I don't know like what happened, but I think it was, yeah. So it was a weird thing. But Lipstick Under My Burqa was always the original name, but maybe I felt like it needs a Hindi title or whatever.
Yeah.
So when it went into production, it was called Lipstick Wale Sapne. But the moment I started editing the film, I just knew that the title has to be Lipstick Under My Burqa.
Right. It just felt right.
Yeah, so then it just, but that was always the original title. It's just that,
Yeah.
so, but during the shoot and all, like our claps and all, everything had Lipstick Wale Sapne written on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that you said that all your sort of reading, and especially from a female perspective, has shaped your films. But I wanted to ask you about the 4 characters in Lipstick Under My Burqa and where that inspiration came from. Was it from the reading and the research that you've done, growing up, or are they a part of you, or, where did that come from?
I mean, definitely not out of some kind of research. It's not like I really, unless I have to research something technical, I feel
Yeah,
my characters really emerge more from my imagination. But like I said, I think our imagination is shaped by what we've experienced, people
yeah,
we've met, things we've read, all of that, things we've watched, and all of that. So I think with Lipstick, because I was making it post and writing it post turning 30, the one thing I knew was that I wanted to change the milieu. Turning 30 was this upper middle class girl who's having this sort of coming of age crisis. So I
yeah,
definitely wanted to change the milieu and do a film which has more, which is women with, oh my God, the crackers. I don't know if you can hear them. Um,
I hope you're
so,
not missing out.
no, not at all. They're
Okay.
banned. I don't know why they're being burst. So, I just wanted to deal with women who also have economic struggle, because I do feel that a certain kind of economic struggle and a certain kind of economic milieu makes you take decisions and do things which you wouldn't necessarily do, maybe if you didn't if you were not like um, in dire financial need.
Yeah,
So I think like so that milieu I definitely wanted to change. And the other thing was that I really was interested in exploring this idea of freedom, because I did feel, and I do feel still now, maybe slightly less, like that I'm not fully free. And that time I think I was really feeling like that a lot, that like I've had a very liberal upbringing, and my parents have been very, were very, very like, they never put any kind of limitations or boundaries in terms of what I could do or what I thought, or but I still felt like there is something inside me that's very, very chained, and I wanted to explore that. And I did feel that rather than exploring it, so then I thought that why don't I explore it in a different milieu, where there's also this kind of there's tradition, the burden of tradition, and the burden of economics. And
right.
that's really where like these characters kind of emerge about women, from a certain section of society who are trying to break out. Like they were always never going to be very very rich or privileged or anything. So
Yeah,
I think it was that. And then I did want to like have different age groups, and so it pretty much was very organic. The moment I started thinking like this whole freedom thing, and then I just
yeah,
started thinking about these 4 characters, and like of slightly different age groups, and going through slightly different things and having things that they sort of want. So yeah, I think that's really where it came from. It's obviously not based on any real like person like that, but like I have seen, for instance, what this idea of widowhood does. I saw
yeah,
my paternal grandmother. She, like because my grandfather had passed away, she would like not wear really bright saris. So
yeah,
and when I was a kid, I'm like, why aren't you wearing like this, this other colored sari? She's like, no, 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 I don't. And nobody had told her, but it was those kind of things. So I think like there were a lot of things that I had sort of seen, which were sort of, which kind of made their way into into the film. And yeah, I think like definitely like taking a class which is not very economically privileged was very important to me post turning 30. And I
okay,
think yeah, and so even with Dolly Kitty, I think like, because I feel like those decisions and what their life choices are, as like I feel what economic and financial compulsion does is that it doesn't, you are not sitting like in a space where you can keep making choices which seem correct to society. So
yeah,
many things
yeah.
you just do because you're like in that moment you have to sort of survive. So I like exploring. I mean, both the films I've enjoyed exploring that.
That's incredible. I mean, and I found it amazing how you tied in the 4 stories in Lipstick and the 2 stories in Dolly, and they just work, they just intertwine with each other, and it's so well done. Um, so let's go on to Dolly Kitty. Okay, there's so many scenes that grabbed me, and I wanted to actually specifically talk about one where it's actually at the beginning where Kajal, so Bhumi's character, she says to Konkona, Dolly, that your husband is being inappropriate with me and being indecent with me. And I think the sheer ignorance and just kind of she just laughs it off, and it came at a shock to the audience of why she did that. I want to know, as a director, what why you made that choice, and how the actresses also kind of took it on. What happened in that moment?
So that scene is a very defining sort of scene for me, because um, it tells us that Kajal, Kitty, is very sort of, she's very clear and honest, like she's seeing things the way they are,
Yeah,
whereas Dolly, is used to living in a way where she's constantly pretending. So it's easiest for her to just pretend like she hasn't heard the real thing, or that's not what what her younger cousin meant, because she doesn't want to deal with it. So I think
right.
I had written that scene, so it was written exactly like that, this one
Okay.
is going to laugh and be like, oh no, I think it's your hormones and you don't know, and maybe you are only attracted to him, and maybe
Yeah.
like you don't know what it's like to be in the city. Because I wanted to establish very clearly that Dolly is a character who's not dealing with, she's not being able to look reality in the face, and her entire transformation is that by the end of the film she's able to see the truth and acknowledge the truth. So I think for that graph it was very important. I do think that it does, this is how it often is, that um, when you immediately confront somebody and say your husband is like this, very
Yeah.
often they will
Yeah.
uh,
They would shrug it off.
we'll just shrug it off, especially in families and all, because I feel like there's a lot of um, like um, sexual assaults, and just generally people feeling unsafe within family environments, and we never really talk about it. But I
Yeah.
did feel it was instinctively going to be it. That scene was always like, from the time I thought of the film, I always, it that scene was always very clear in my head that this one is going to laugh. She's not going to, and she's going to basically turn around and blame the cousin. For me, it was a very key scene that set the tone for what the film is. That this one is in, is wanting to live in this make believe world, and the other one is trying to just find herself in this city.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. And I remember in one of your interviews, you'd said that Greater Noida, like you love the space because it's trying too hard. And I really felt like Dolly's character just kind of came hand in hand with the space that you used, in terms of, she's like, ha, हमारे पास AC है, हमारे पास ये है, नया घर है, हमारे पास ये है, वो है. And I guess, like, before the pandemic started, we're all living in this sort of hashtag Insta life where we also show how great our lives are on the surface. So, I mean, I guess this is just a bit of a creative question, in the sense that if you were to go back and sort of write Dolly Kitty now, post pandemic, how do you think Dolly and Kitty would have changed? How do you think Greater Noida would have changed, if at all?
Yeah, very, very tough question, because this film, I mean, though it's come out, and I made it recently, I thought of it really long back, when,
Right.
many, many years back. And I think, like, for me, the film, the characters only emerged from the space of Greater Noida. So I can't, imagine them,
I think I
outside.
put you on the
But I
spot.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know whether it would be really different, post pandemic, because I'm not very sure, looking at the way things are, that some um I don't know. I mean, I can't really say, but um I don't
It's
know
not
whether
changed
they're the kind
much.
of characters. Yeah, they're the kind of characters who would have had, like, so many realizations, because I feel because they've been because the pandemic is on, etc. So I'm not very sure about
Okay.
what that would be, but maybe it would have changed Dolly's, it would have made it harder for Dolly to be with her husband because she can't be so out and about. So I think things would have been very
Yes,
difficult in that house. And if Kitty was living there, so maybe it would be a very different film. I mean, from that
yeah,
perspective, because
right.
I feel a lot of women also manage to, like survive difficult situations because they have ways of like coping. So,
The
like
outlet.
you're out and you're busy with other things. So you're dulling yourself. So Dolly's character particularly is like, she's always dulling herself to what's actually happening. So, she's so like busy with whatever, like she has to go to the school, she's going to work, and she's so busy with her gadgets and trying to get the new house because she doesn't want to deal with the truth about herself and her husband. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes, I mean, I guess maybe in a pandemic, you're forced to deal with all that if you're like locked into the house for many months with your entire family.
Yeah, it can get tough. Like there was a scene where she was just dressed up and sunglasses, pen eye, drink media, and there's music on, she's dancing. I was lovely. I was like, it's these little things that are freeing and liberating in just that like moment and space. Um, there's so much fight, in both of your leading characters, in Dolly and Kitty. And not just, you don't explore them just in their homes, but also females in the workspace. So I found it really interesting. When Dolly's in the office, she is just expected to make the tea, and by the end, she just makes herself tea and sits down, and everyone's like, what's going on? And similarly, Kajal, Kitty, in the beginning, she works in a factory and she ends up saying, I'm not your slave, and she walks out. um I guess, have you personally experienced situations like that in a male working environment?
Um, Not really, because first of all, I've never really worked in a proper corporate office kind of a setup. But definitely, I feel I've faced a lot of discrimination just being a female filmmaker who wants to make films about women, and they're not necessarily very mainstream films. So I definitely feel like that's a very different kind, a systemic kind of discrimination, which I definitely faced. Like, when Turning 30, I'd made Turning 30, we couldn't find distributors for the film. And eventually, the production house that had produced the film, Prakasha Productions, they had to release the film themselves. Um, and we didn't, I didn't have any budget to market the film, and all that is all because the distributors and all, like, oh, what is this film or this girl turning
Uh,
30, like, very dismissive and patronizing, and basically totally blind to anything which doesn't fit into the mainstream patriarchal kind of context. And
yeah.
I also had issues when I was actually shooting for Turning 30 and making the film, which is like, production people who didn't take my, like, they got me on the first day of shoot, they just got me even though I'd asked for a particular camera, they got me some other camera.
Oh,
And
okay.
and I was like, but for 2 months I've already told you I want this camera. So I said, I'm not going to shoot, I want the camera that I've asked for. So I found that you have to keep asserting yourself in and I think I learned a lot with Turning 30 vis-a-vis that, like, even in terms of my post-production studios, I was given the worst kind of slots because they were not taking me seriously. They would give me slots in the middle of the night. They wouldn't give me the best technician. So there was a lot of which I didn't understand actually at that time. I was also very young, to be able to see that they think this is a very minor, like, they don't think the film is important, because, and they don't think the filmmaker is important or my work is of any value or anything. So I think I learned a lot, and I, of course, then in a very big way, I had to face it with lipstick as well, because first of all, there was no distribution for the film. Again, like, it was
Oh,
like
okay.
I kept showing it to one studio after another studio, and no one was interested in like releasing the film. Then on top of that, there was a whole censorship thing. The film got banned,
Yes.
and we had to fight this big battle. But the all the problems that basically I faced for Turning 30 and Lipstick were that these films were too much from a female point of view, and it was a female filmmaker making a film with female actors who are not very mainstream stars. And then, like, so it was, so I feel I faced a lot of, and it's a continuous thing, this discrimination that one that one faces because of the kind of work you want to do. And getting money, getting your work out there. So I
Yeah.
think for me it's been different. It's been but it's also systemic. So I feel like, for somebody who's working as an accountant in that kind of khadi kind of bhandar office,
Huh.
and like Dolly, so it's my in my case it might be very macro,
Yeah.
but it's also micro. Like, for instance, when she has to make the tea, and with me it's like when they're like not sending me the equipment I've asked for.
Yeah.
So I think like we do constantly face this, but I mean, and one does hear of people saying like, that in a meeting, in a work meeting, when there's like a lunch break, it'll become like, if they have to order food, somehow it's like the woman will have to be in charge of ordering the food.
Yes.
And why is that so? So maybe not. I mean, depends on where you are, and also obviously I feel like it may not necessarily be making the, but it just depends on where you are and what kind of environment and what is the context. But I feel like, we are constantly fighting that very inherent like patriarchy in the system.
Yeah. I guess here in the UK it's similar as well. If I dare say. But yeah, things like the hospitality function of things like, organizing the Christmas party, for example, or
Mhm.
getting the lunch or the tea or showing people around, or the HR function. It is usually the women who are kind of set to do that. I have not seen many men. I used to have an office life before I became an actor. So it's just interesting to see that in your film. And I was like, huh, that's what that's about. Okay, cool. Yeah. Did it happen with Dolly Kitty? Do you feel like it's improved now with the treatment and how you feel? Um, because you said with lipstick it was tough and turning 30 was tough. What about Dolly Kitty? Because
Dolly Kitty was relatively much easier
right,
because because it's produced by Balaji and they release films themselves as well. So it was much easier. I didn't have to worry about how the film will release. But then COVID happened, and of course it was
yeah,
supposed to have like a big theatrical release. But I mean, I guess it's a film's destiny. But I'm happy it came out on Netflix because I feel people all over the world have been, sort of been able to access the film. And
yeah, it's
um,
definitely more accessible on Netflix.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's been great. And yeah, it was definitely easier with Dolly Kitty in terms of I wasn't having to but like that there's a certain budget that you'll get for a film like this because of course, and the thing is, as a filmmaker, and I always tell people, it's so little about talent, honestly. It's so much about persistence and resilience and knowing how to make it work out. Like, I can't make a film like Dolly Kitty with a really big budget because
right.
it's going to become financially not feasible for the producer at all, because they need to feel like they'll get their money back. So I feel like there are all those things that are constantly sort of there. So of course there are like I'm saying, so there's always some kind of fight. Like, I know that like the kind of film I want to make, it's not necessary that I really get always the budget that I want. So I think that is and it's a mathematical thing, and that's because the way the industry is, and again it's systemic because the
Yeah,
audiences are skewed, and I think like they've just been trained to only look out for one kind of film. So as a result, you always are, there's no audience for this kind of, there's not that much of an audience for this kind of film, so therefore you can only get this much money for that film. So I think like it's different, and of course I feel like Dolly Kitty has been very breezy compared to the release of Lipstick, which was in fact even tougher than the release of Turning 30 because of the whole censorship thing.
yeah.
In that sense, yeah, I think it's been easier, but yeah.
Cool. I wanted to speak about some more scenes in Dolly Kitty. When, for example, there was this really heartfelt moment when Dolly's son, he sits in the school bus, in the girls' school bus, to go to the doll museum,
Yeah.
and he's dressing up like a girl, and then we see that he's just there, and Dolly accepts it. Dolly just, she's crying and she just accepts that this is who my son is. I'm just going to be there. And I felt a sense of like inner healing from Dolly's part, because she's had issues with her mother being absent and not feeling that kind of acceptance and love from her mother. Did you know that your work would carry like such responsibility, and not just for India but also globally, and this entire sense of like breaking parental patterns, like you've intertwined it very well with gender conformity. How did you do that, and why?
I must say that I feel like in India, I mean, I really can't say for the rest of the world, but there's too much of this sort of like this idea of motherhood. It's put too much on a pedestal. You know, it's too much like it's like the most important thing in a woman's life, and women must be perfect mothers. And I think somehow this idea has always bothered me, because I feel at the end of the day, women are also human beings. Why are like, and why is motherhood like, like supposed to be the defining thing in a woman's life? And even if she is a mother, then why is she? So I just feel like, the portrayal of moms in Indian cinema has always been these like really sacrificing and like very strange kind of women who don't have anything of their own. And I always felt like women are full beings, because no one does that to fathers. They are always like, men always are full human beings and never defined just by their fatherhood. So I think this is and like it is something that I think has been playing on my mind as to, like this idea of, who's a great mother, who's a good mother. And I've always had a working mom, and I think my mom has been really, really amazing. And I don't think that she should have, been at home looking after me. I'm glad that, she's been living her life. So I think it's that feeling, and also that that I think like unpacking that idea of motherhood and deconstructing it. I think that's where it kind of came from. And I did feel that there was, I don't know, it was very instinctive, that connection was. And at first thought of Dolly, I always thought she'd have these two sons, and this one son does identify as female, and she is having issues. And the thing is, I think the three of them are so connected, because actually Dolly's mother did what she lived for herself, actually. So in that sense, but she couldn't manage to make it work out for her. Like, she couldn't do the two things together. Like, she couldn't live for herself and be there for her daughter. So she abandoned her daughter, which is a very rare thing actually in India for a mother to sort of do. And of course, so Dolly's character has all that kind of resentment. And I feel on the surface, she's trying to be exactly what her mother was not. Like, have this facade of this great family, that she's doing everything for her kids, she's doing everything for her husband, and her home is great, and she's nothing like her mother. But the truth is, she is like her mother, because she also wants to actually live her own life. She just doesn't want to recognize it. She's also looking for some personal fulfillment. And in accepting her son, so actually it's kind of connected. Like, she can only accept her mother if she accepts her son. And in order to so she could only accept her son after having that confrontation with her mother. So it's just kind of all very connected. And it's only when she accepts her son can she accept her own desire for sexual fulfillment, actually, which is why then after that is when she finally uh, you know d- uh, even gives in to her desire with Osman. So I felt there was these kind of there was this kind of this. Of course, the exact connections and all came through once I was writing, but the fact that she'll have this son who she can't deal with was always sort of there, and it always made me feel like she's definitely somebody whose mother has abandoned her. So then later I thought I may as well get that abandonment um into the film. And in terms of responsibility, what I feel is that I think if you try and be honest in your work, in your writing, and also how you're directing, then who you are as a person kind of comes through. And I feel if you're genuinely just like you have some basic humanity towards people, then I feel like you won't go wrong, whether it's the, depiction of, um, you know, fluid gender identities or homosexuality or anything, even if you yourself haven't had that lived experience. So I
Right.
think, so I feel so same with Made in Heaven in that sense. I just feel like, if basically like that sense of who you are is there in your work, and
Hmm.
your point of view is basically a humanistic point of view, where there is a genuine respect for people of uh, you know of all kinds, and people who all want different things. So I think then that kind of comes through. So I tend to not worry too much about responsibility that I carry, etc., because I
Yeah.
feel like I try to just be honest to how I see things. And and I do think that little sense of dignity, it's
Yeah.
very, very important. I really don't like the idea of of creating caricatures, which is very common in mainstream Hindi cinema, creating caricatures out of any kind of characters who are not straight, or
Yeah.
who identify themselves, like trans characters and all. I just find
Hmm.
it's, I don't know why there is the need to you know I don't know, just have that weird kind of lens on them. And uh,
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's a person. So I think like that humanistic lens, I feel if you just look at everybody as a person, I think like that kind of comes through. So I tend to not worry.
Yeah.
But uh, of course I am very conscious also, in the sense that, like, about how I shoot women and how I shoot intimate scenes and things like that, because overall I just feel like, we don't realize the amount of patriarchy we are living with. It's so ingrained in our system that there
Yeah.
are so many things we would do on just autopilot, because uh,
We're
cinema
designed
is
that
so
way.
shaped by, yeah, the male point of view, and there are hardly any women filmmakers. So I just feel like, the male point of view in terms, the male gaze in terms of how camera is used and
Hmm.
things like that, even like songs and all that, one has to be so careful, because there are so many things which you have to, like, examine. You've not even thought about it, and then, like, oh my god, like, some, you need a song and someone's going to send you a song with some lyrics, and you're like, oh my god, like, suddenly you're like, what are these lyrics? And that kind of
Yeah.
uh,
इसका क्या मतलब होता है?
yeah.
But actually, speaking of that, in one of your previous interviews, you had mentioned, in popular culture, Bollywood, when a woman is raped, in the film, then she doesn't have a life after that. And I found that comment very interesting because it's true. I mean, even when I was growing up watching it, I was like, no, I hope she doesn't get. I mean, obviously, you don't hope that they don't get raped, but there is this sense of like the shame that comes after it. And I guess, I mean, you just said it for me, like you show it through a different gaze, and you've got to be very careful of that. How do you sort of take away the male gaze and sort of unlearn and unlayer everything that we've been taught our whole lives?
I think it's a process, and I don't think that one has arrived there. I think as long as one is constantly thinking,
Yeah.
um, but it's very hard, because I feel like so much of it is just inbuilt. And um, I think, like, even things like just the usage of songs and all of that. So I think that
Yeah.
it is very hard, because the thing is, we don't know like what kind of cinematic language there would have been if there were always, half the number of filmmakers were women right from the start. So we
Yeah.
don't know. Now we are living with a cinematic language that has been created by men. So I think there's no there's no answer. But I guess the thing is that it's a constant space of learning,
Yeah.
and constant space of, like, recognizing what you're doing. And um it's in all the small decisions one sort of takes. um yeah. And I think having more, for me, like, having more women working on the film really helps, like having a female editor. I've for Dolly Kitty had a female producer. So all of
Mm.
that, I feel, also really, all of that really adds up. With Made in Heaven, there was just like three or so, we were all women writing the show. So I think
Right.
um, it's also that, I think, like, having like more female dominant spaces is important.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, but I think there's no answer, because it's not like we reach a point that they're like, oh, I'm not
Yeah,
looking at anything through a patriarchal lens, because we always, are still doing that. But yeah, and this rape thing, I totally, I mean, I find it, even the term that Izzat
yeah,
Luti, as though the woman has lost her honor, and it's
yeah,
not um, that the attacker, the person who's actually committed the crime, he's the
yeah.
person who could have, lost his honor. So I think like the terminology and all of that. So that I think like the depiction of rape in Indian cinema needs a study of its own.
It's really interesting. That's it. It's studying, it's researching, it's looking into it and really thinking about what needs to be done rather than what has always gone on.
Yeah, someone had actually told me that in the late 70s and early 80s, they used to actually, there was a thing of inserting a rape scene into a film,
Mm,
like almost as it was like a way to like excite the audiences. They say, oh no, that one rape scene must
right.
be there, and all of that. So, like that's so telling of the kind of culture, the kind of patriarchal culture that was prevalent and is still prevalent in society. That, it's like looked at as a thrill in a film, like to
I did
definitely.
not know that.
Yeah, and that time almost every film had one rape scene, and it was never the main. It was never the main heroine. She would never get raped, because then
Yeah,
she had to live. So it was always be the sister, the hero's sister, or someone like that, who then would
yeah,
either be killed or they would commit suicide.
yeah.
So it's quite interesting that that's how it was.
Oh God. Um, Speaking about sex, let's talk about sex. And but in a different way. So we as Asians have invented the Kama Sutra, but we do find it awkward to talk about sex openly. Even me, when I say the word, usually I'm just like sex. Yeah, it's very awkward to speak about it. And I feel like your films are all about this girl power and this expression of this sexual freedom. Well, I mean, sexual desires and repression that leads to freedom. I mean, in Lipstick, you had uh, the character Ushma Parmar, who plays Buaji, and she's masturbating and everything, and there's a lot in Dolly and Kitty as well, just finding their sexuality. Um, how did that like sort of come about? Like, why did you insert these types of ideas in your films?
I must say, I never thought that I'm going to. I've never thought of them as ideas I've inserted into the films. I just feel that the moment you start examining a character closely,
Mm,
you know, and you're like looking at who they are in a very intimate way, then
mm,
obviously their relationship with their own bodies and the agency that they have over their own lives kind of, I feel, comes up. Because I feel like um it's just so it's not like I've planned that, oh, this must be about her. But the moment I'm looking at a character like that, I feel like it'll come up that what is she feeling about, what is her desire? Is she able to fulfill it? Does she have to hide it? Is she able to fulfill it but not openly?
yeah,
Is she satisfied? Is she not? So I feel for me, it's really about holistically looking at a character. And I do feel that there is a lot of sexual repression uh, in women in India, and it's so strange because virginity is kind of still looked at as something amazing to kind of hold on to. Then it's like you're not, and then women are constantly shamed for what they're wearing. Also, this is too short, so it's
yeah,
so confusing. And the main thing is that women don't own their bodies, so even whether it's like how many children and all they want to have, like so many times the men are not wanting to use protection, so many things like that. So I just feel like, will women ever, can women be free you know they can't actually be free until and unless they own their bodies and they
yeah,
have agency. So, and I feel that's not, it's still a work in progress, because like, why should your family dictate what you have to wear or not wear?
Yeah.
If someone gets assaulted, they're like, she must have brought it upon herself because she
Yeah.
was dressed provocatively. So I think this kind of relationship with shame, honor, agency, and I truly feel that until we own our bodies, we can't really be free. And I think that's why it keeps coming up in my work, because I just feel like it's not enough to just be like, okay, I'm very free. I'm going out there to, earn my bread and butter and I'm allowed to work. But it's also about how much free will do I have over my own physical being. So I
Yeah.
think maybe that thing keeps coming up. So it's never really intended, but I feel it just, uh, it's very intrinsic to the examine. From my point of view, I think the moment I start looking at these characters, I feel these things kind of come up. How much is free will or whatever, or even like in Kajal's, in Kitty's character, in Dolly Kitty, like this whole idea of um, what is correct for her to do, what is not, and society might say what she's doing is not correct, but actually it's giving her a lot of physical comfort and maybe a little more dignity. So it's very, it's just about looking at it um, from that character's point of view and seeing where they are with their own being in a sort of 360-degree way. And I feel the moment you do that, obviously this very important aspect of sexuality comes in. And I must say it's never been planned, but I know that it's a very, it is a strong theme in my work.
It is, yeah. And I would say it's liberating, and it's very freeing. I mean, for an adult me, it's very freeing, and not just the sexual side of it. It's the, okay, how you dress, how loud you are, okay, you're told, don't be too loud and don't be too bold and don't be too confident and be humble and modest, and all these this kind of Victorian mindset. And I remember one of your previous interviews, you also said there was this Victorian mindset that the British left, and we've just stuck with it. And I think just growing up, if I may say so myself, I was really interested in Victorian literature, and I didn't understand at the time why. I was like, this feels really familiar to me, but I always used to come at it from a feminist perspective, and at the time I didn't really know what feminism meant. I just came at it from a certain perspective, and my teacher always said, can you try a different perspective? And I was like, yeah, but this is really interesting. And I realized now it was my South Asian culture,
Yeah.
that I was like kind of trying to fight. And your films are making me realize, oh, that's what's going on. We're set in the UK. Did you know, or did you preempt that, it's not just for women in India, but also women in the UK or around the world are also kind of waiting on you to do this kind of stuff and free us from your films? Did you know that this would be the case?
Not at all. In fact, I feel like uh, when I was making lipstick, it was just like I was just making a film that I wanted to make. So I didn't realize that, it will have so much resonance um, at all, actually. And, of course, so I do feel that. And I think when I started traveling with lipstick, I realized that, the thing is, the story is in a way the same everywhere, in different ways, in different contexts. Because even in Scandinavian countries, the way people were responding to lipstick, I realized that, and that's one of like the most progressive places for women. But
Yeah.
even there, like women were always coming up to me and they were like, my God, we feel so connected. And it's not exactly like that, but there is so much that we are dealing with as well. So I realized that the thing is, patriarchy cuts through cultures. I mean, it's just through culture, through religion, through region, and through race, through communities. So it's just that's how the world, has been like sort of created and is functioning. So I think like any examination, the moment you look little deeply into it, I feel like then I think like that kind of resonance probably comes uh, because you start seeing that inequality, like you said, that whole chai thing.
Yeah.
It's not like you've really been in an office where you had to make the chai, but it starts
Yeah.
making you think that, oh, like, there is some other kind of systemic inequality that you've dealt with. So I think that's the beauty of cinema and the beauty of stories, that though I feel like the more local they are, the more universal they become, and
Yeah.
more specific they are, I feel like the deeper truths they actually, end up uh, telling. But I'm very, very grateful that, that people from so many different countries, have engaged with my work. Even Dolly Kitty, we had a lovely film open at Busan, and we had such interesting reactions from the Korean women there. So I feel
Wow.
like it's yeah, it's just there's so much joy in feeling that your work is cutting across cultures.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely iconic, if I can use that word. Um, I'm gonna round up soon, so I just wanted to ask you, what's next for you? Will you make international films, or anywhere else in the globe, or is it going for now just going to stick to India and local?
Uh, I would love to do something international. I don't think like that opportunity has really sort of come up.
Okay,
Uh, and till something comes up like that, I'm very happy to make films. And I think now things are getting kind of collapsed because I feel like so many global networks are in India, and I feel like now there's no um, I mean, it's not so hard. Like Dolly Kitty is accessible to everybody, so I feel like that's like a really good thing. I don't know yet whether there's a film that I can make, which is, I'm sure there is, but it's just that I haven't like I don't know what it is that I would really like to explore in a culture that's not Indian.
okay.
But till then, I'm happy making. I would love to. I think it'd be very, very exciting. But I think nothing like that has emerged as yet, and I hope it does. Um,
Yeah, well,
but
we hope it does as well.
yeah, but till then, I'm very happy making films about women in India. I feel like their stories are largely untold, and I
Yeah,
feel like somehow it's like my calling to really keep doing that. And right now, I'm working on a show called Bombay Begums.
right.
Should be out early next year. Yeah. So
Okay, early next year. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that.
yeah.
How's the preparation going for that?
It's going well. I'm in fact in the last stages of post production now. So I'm just literally like, I think this by December I'll be done with the post production.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's exciting. I've been doing the entire edit. So that's what I've been doing the entire lockdown. I've just the entire time of the pandemic, I've been working on Bombay Vegans on the edit and post. So I finished shooting just before uh,
Ah,
COVID.
lucky.
Literally, we finished shooting the first week of March. So
That was lucky.
it was really lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that show has been my companion through the pandemic. But I'm really
Ah,
excited about it. It's a multi-narrative show about 5 different women in Bombay. So excited.
okay. Interesting. Before we go, there's a UK Asian Film Festival has like a Filmwala group, and we have a few questions, if you don't mind, from a
Yeah.
few people. So I'll just read them out. This one is from the journalist Sailash from Asian Culture Vulture, and he says, "Do you feel you can make films without limitations?"
I think growing up in India, there are already so many limitations that are ingrained in us. There's so much self-censorship um, that I think it's that there are a lot of like barriers. I feel for me personally, I'm not speaking for all filmmakers, but for me, which are simply there, I feel because I've grown up in India and I've grown up with the kind of knowledge of what kind of cinema actually gets made, and that definitely limits your thoughts and your imagination. And I think that there's a lot of inbuilt subconscious self censorship. So I wish the answer was that there is no limit, but I don't think, I would be honest in answer. I mean, that would be the truthful answer. I think there's a lot of stuff that's always blocking us because we've just grown up like that. And it's one more thing in that unlearning, like, where you can go, where you can't go. So many things I feel like, so many ideas we don't even think of because, we just feel like it won't get made, it won't happen. Also, I think for me personally, my big limitation comes from knowing, like, I'm like constantly doing the math, and I don't think
Right.
that's a good thing, but like that's like, I'm like, okay, this kind of film then will be made in this budget, then that'll happen, then it can get made. And I feel that's very limiting. I never think of any big budget films because I feel like, oh, and I feel I really want to break that because I feel that's like a barrier in my head, which has been placed by the system, where I work. And but it's totally there. I'm constantly doing the math, and I before that idea comes, it'll go because I'm like, no, 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 that I won't get funding only. It won't happen. So I feel like
Ah,
it's important to work towards breaking those barriers. And of course, there's censorship.
yeah.
So, like I'm saying, it's not like I never think that, oh, I'm going to not write this because it's censored, but I feel subconsciously you already know you're not writing stuff because there's censorship.
That's really sad. I'm sad about that.
Yeah.
So we have Ritu Soni and a member of our Film Wala group. And this is regarding Made in Heaven. She says, I hope there's more of that to come. It was such a treat to see the series. The characters were so real, and I love the stories for each character. How was it received amongst Indian public?
It was really well received. I think it's been one of those shows that just got like a lot of love. So it's been really well received, and I think the most moving uh, you know thing for us was that I think it had such a big impact on the LGBTQI community. There were so many people who actually used the show to come out to their families. They actually made their families watch it, and so I
Wow.
think it was we got so much love for the show. It's been really really wonderful. Of course, I'm not sure that the show's really penetrated the is like the particular economic, like the slightly lower economic strata. But yeah, amongst all the people who watched it, it's really got a lot of love. And yeah, I think I'm very very happy that the show came out and we made it, and
Yeah.
uh, people
We're,
reacted so beautifully to it. Yeah.
we're waiting for the next one.
Yes.
um, this one is from Jazz Dillon. And the question is, what has the response been from male audiences towards your films? Do you feel that there is a noticeable shift in attitudes and immediate impact made?
I think the male audience's reactions are always very, very interesting. Honestly, with Dolly Kitty, because the pandemic has been on, and like normally with the film, if it comes out in the theater, we end up going to the theaters and like taking around and seeing what people are saying and all of that. So with Lipstick, it was very, very interesting. A lot of the regular Indian male audience, first of all, a lot of men went to watch the film without telling anyone they were going for the film.
Ah,
Then a lot of them, actually laughed at very poignant moments because they were very, very uncomfortable. But a lot of them had like, I got a lot of messages and a lot of calls, and I read a lot of stuff also that people felt they underwent some kind of shift, that they had never been forced to think about life from a woman's point of view. And there were some very, very interesting experiences like that. And of course, there were and even for Dolly Kitty, I've got a lot of messages from like a lot of men who actually were very moved by the film, and really felt that they've never thought about female sexuality like that before, and what it is and all of that. But of course, there'll always be men who will be like, you're like, what is this, why is this important? So I think um, I've seen that more now, because I think like social media trolling is really high now. So there's
yeah,
a lot of that. Oh, you're destroying like Indian culture, and women shouldn't be like that and all of that. But I don't take that seriously because I feel like a lot of it is just trolls and they're not like very very serious. But from people who have had conversations with and all of that, who watched the film, I think uh, yeah, there's definitely a feeling of like seeing things from a different point of view that they're not
yeah,
used to seeing from. And I think for me, that's very satisfying. And I feel like somewhere my job is done with that, because it's just that if for those 2 hours you can really be with those characters, whichever film it is, but for those
yeah.
2 hours you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes and experience what they're experiencing, then that's my job done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's nice not to just see, the perfect character and who's idealized and this is how we should be. No, they smoke, they drink, they, do whatever they want to do. It's so real. and we're able to connect to it because of that. So that's
Yeah.
all. Aman, are we taking questions from the audience?
Yes, please, Nisha. There's some questions in the chat if
Okay.
you want to have a look through.
Is that okay with you, Alankrita? Just a few questions?
Yeah, 5-10 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the chat. Oh, there's loads. Okay, so we have, okay, says, hello, ma'am. With every film, you are also moving from one city to another, Mumbai to Bhopal to Noida, and the insertion of a city's politics into your stories about women is very much visible. What is it that attracts you to these cities, and how do you go about researching on them together the lived experiences of gender and the city?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, so to be very honest, I've it's not been very planned like that. But like Turning 30 was set in Bombay, and I've been living in Bombay since I finished college. So I think like that whole experience was very it was very specific. It was actually, the film was largely set in Bandra and a particular kind of life, which I kind of was which I felt is very similar to my kind of life and the lives of my friends and everything. So that was, in that sense, the closest to in a very real way to my life in that sense. I spent a lot of time in Bhopal, and the reason that I set the film Lipstick on My Burkha in Bhopal is because I wanted a place where there are characters, two characters are Hindu and two are Muslim, and they're really living, like almost like in the same, they're living in the same building. And so that kind of sort of close community living is something that I had seen in Bhopal. And also I felt like Bhopal, visually, you can see like the tradition in terms of the architecture. And then the newer buildings in Bhopal are very uh, they're very ugly actually. So you can just see that tradition and modernity kind of fighting it out in that city. And there's that old city, and then you go to the other place, which is the new city. And I was very familiar with Bhopal because I had worked on Rajniti. I was associate director, and then I had spent like a couple of years. I was constantly in and out of Bhopal. So I think that's the reason I set the film there. But like the characters hadn't come to me immediately with the city. I had thought of them, and then I thought of the city. But with Dolly Kitty, it was very different because Greater Noida. So my mother lives in Noida, and I'm quite familiar with Greater Noida because she's invested in some property there. And I would keep driving with her to Greater Noida, and I would find it so weird. Like it's just like there's just a lot of new buildings and not so many people. Lots of stuff is under construction, and at night there seem to be, like on that highway, a lot of call centers. And I just kept thinking, and then a lot of these hostel kind of places, where these young people from small towns, they just come and live, and they're trying to make their life. So I just found that whole, and I just found that whole space very, very interesting. So with I think with Dolly Kitty, it was really clear, like it was the space first, and then the characters emerged, which was different from. And with Turning 30, I think it was at the same time. That character was always going to be a Bombay girl. So I think it's different, but all these places, I think, are places where I've had a lived experience. So I've not yet, and Made in Heaven is set in Delhi again. Like I've spent, my college years in Delhi. My family lives in Delhi, so I'm like, grown up in Delhi, etc. So I feel like I've not yet written something where, I'm not familiar with the city, and it's placed somewhere else. And for me, the city does shape how things are. And I feel women are constantly negotiating their space in a city. So that is something that I've been very aware of since I was very young. So yeah.
Interesting. It's given me a lot to think about myself. I'm just like, what does it mean to be in London? I have a question from Samir Bamra. How do you react to the negative and positive comments about your films?
Well, the positive comments, of course, make you feel really good and happy. And but I think with age and time, I think one becomes used to dealing with the negative comments as well.
Yeah.
And I think like it's really important to focus on your own work and not get too caught up, because like no one else really knows what your journey is, and where you were coming from, what exactly you were trying to say, what else you want to do. So I think that it's important to not get too bogged down by negative comments. I think it's part and parcel of the game, and I feel I experienced it very early, because turning 30 didn't get like really great. It got a lot of love from a lot of women, but it didn't really get the greatest reviews or anything,
Yeah.
and it didn't do well at the box office. So I think I learned very early that it's like you can't depend on so much external validation. When it comes, it's great, and when it doesn't come, you just have to put your nose to the ground and continue working, because only you know what like what you want to, like the stories you want to tell, what you want to say. And I feel as long as one is consistent in one's effort to tell stories that mean something to me,
Yeah.
and like and I'm trying to tell them as honestly as I can, I think it's fine. So you get used to it. And it's okay. And I faced so much rejection even during lipstick. It took me so long to get the film out, and but I
Yeah.
think it really toughened me up in that sense. I think that whole battle with the censor board, and also this whole long battle when I just had the film and it was just lying in the can, and everyone was just rejecting the film. So I think that really also, so I feel I've experienced a lot of this pretty early on. So I think now I'm a little more like, it's great when everyone's loving it, but it's also
Yeah.
okay. And also, everyone's not going to like everything exactly in the same way, and
Yeah.
or that. And every film I feel is like, a different entity of its own. Every series is its own entity. So I think like the important thing is to continue one's, love for telling stories and creating characters, and also not live too much in the past. I think that's something, because one can also be too stuck on like past glory and all that. Also I feel is just like, I mean, you've done it, it's over and done, like
Oh yeah.
on. Yeah. So yeah, one has to be a bit philosophical about it, otherwise you can't survive at every bad, like anyone or any rejection. Because although we go through so much until a film goes on the floor, how many times script is
Yeah.
rejected by
Yeah.
actors, by funders, by this one, that you just go mad if you're constantly like.
Yeah.
So I think a little bit you have to be thick-skinned.
No, absolutely. And I think you must have built so much resilience after the number of times it got rejected and then it happened. It's not a reflection, you realize it's not a reflection of you or your work. It's the outsiders, and you just have to keep going. And I guess not just with filmmaking, with any career, I imagine, just anything that you want to. I wanted to ask you if you had any parting comments, if you were an agony aunt, who would you advise men and women something specific, or anything that you want to say?
No, I think I would only want to say, I think, to young aspiring filmmakers, because I get this asked a lot, and I always love saying this.
Okay.
And is that, I think that is really not about talent. I feel everyone has talent, everyone really has potential. It's really about staying in the game, like, having that resilience, having that perseverance to just continue doing your thing no matter what. And I just feel like the difference between people whose films get made and people whose films are not getting made is simply that those, and not that those people whose films are getting made are necessarily more talented or anything. It's just that they've developed a stronger emotional core to be able to deal with rejection and to be able to persevere despite that. So I would only say to young aspiring filmmakers that just keep at it. And and I feel that kind of applies in life too, that if we just keep at it and continue our own thing, like I feel things fall into place. Just getting too involved with treating everything as some kind of validation for oneself, I think uh, is draining and not very
And dangerous as well, I guess.
yeah.
Being an actor and having a lot of actor friends, we're always talking about the, ye audition nahi mila, rejection ho gayi, and it's not a reflection on yourself. You just have to keep going. It's it's a constant journey. So I do appreciate and understand where you're coming from. Just stay in the game, do it. Okay, cool. I would like to just send a quick message to everybody watching. I would urge everyone to watch Dolly Kitty or Wo Chamakte Sitare if you haven't already. And follow Alankrita Shrivastava on Twitter. And I think your Twitter handle is at Alankrita601.
Yeah.
Yes. And while you're doing that, please follow Come to UKAFF on social media as well, because there's so many more events like this, and we're back next month. Finally, thank you so much, Alankrita, for an insightful chat. You're very warm. You have a lovely energy and a lovely light. I'm honored to be speaking to you. So thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to the entire UK Asian Film Festival team. It's such a special festival, and I hope to be back with another film sometime soon.
Definitely. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening and your Diwali, and hopefully see your next film soon.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.